Sabi nga nung kasama ko kanina, who also looked at the book, pag nawala ka pa, ewan ko na.
Alam mo ba't
Divisoria.
Divisoria? Ang name.
Ay, bakit? Bakit Divisoria ang tawag sa Divisoria? So, today, very special because it is the first time that we will be doing this podcast episode for the Presello membership channel. My name is Julia, and today our special guest is an architect, an art historian, an academic lecturer, and frankly, she has like a lot of titles under her belt. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Dr. Architect De Viana.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh no, thank you. We actually invited you here because we are fans of your work. More specifically, your book, Walk Manila.
Thank you.
No, thank you for writing the book. Oh my goodness. If you guys haven't seen the book yet, it is available through Shopee, Lazada,
Through the Tams bookstore,
and through FEU
FEU Publishing
Publishing
House.
House. It's a beautifully illustrated book about the historical and relevant buildings in Manila. Okay, of course, Professor actually has, again, as I mentioned, a lot of things under her belt, a lot of which has to do with the history of our cities. Is it the entire Philippines for you, or more specifically Manila?
It's about Manila, the city of Manila.
So you would say that that's your area of expertise,
Yes.
and maybe one of your favorite topics.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so that being said, I looked through the pages and I saw the map of Manila, and I was just curious before we get into anything or anywhere more specific. Is there anything you can share about Manila itself? I think earlier today, while we were having lunch, you mentioned that Manila didn't start off being called as just Manila.
So Manila actually was Intramuros, or Intramuros was Maynilad. So Nilad would refer to the mangrove plant, which used to be very abundant in the area of the Intramuros area up to Tondo. And And then when the Spaniards came, they adopted the name Maynila, but made a little deviation from it. They referred to it now as Manila.
I see. So
Okay,
it was
so
originally
from
Maynilad.
yes, so
Okay.
Manila became the capital of Spanish colonial Philippines, and then afterwards, Manila expanded to include the areas outside the walls of Intramuros. So it included the suburbs of Binondo, Tondo, Santa Ana, Santa Mesa, Malate, Ermita, all those areas which now comprise the city of Manila.
I see.
And yeah,
Wow. I never would have thought that Manila was used to refer to just Intramuros, like the walled city. And then
it
eventually nga,
expanded.
it expanded. Okay. Ang laki ng expansion niya from Intramuros lang mismo, ha? Like,
Mhm.
Tondo in itself is a massive chunk out of Manila. And then, like, the surrounding ones, I believe the smallest one is Binondo.
One of the
One of them, one of the smaller ones, and then Quiapo, etc.
San Miguel, it's very small.
And then now, Greater Metro Manila is like a really big area now of what we know today. So, okay, going back, I kind of want to know why Tondo is such a massive portion of Manila, considering nga nagsimula pala sa Intramuros.
So it's actually a very old pre-colonial settlement, just like Maynilad. So actually the leaders of Tondo and Maynilad were related. They were actually related also to the old pre-colonial families in Pampanga and in Bulacan.
Wow.
So it was a very old pre-colonial settlement, and therefore its territorial jurisdiction would be large. So understandably.
Because
Okay,
it's small.
so and because of it, it became the capital of what became the Provincia de Tondo, with Tondo town as the capital. And the Provincia de Tondo would now be consisting of different pueblos or different towns, which now comprise the districts of the city of Manila, including
see.
Intramuros.
Okay, okay. Ang laki
And then
ng
from
bakit.
Provincia de Tondo, it became known later as the Provincia de Manila, with Manila or Intramuros as capital
As capital.
of
I
that
see.
province.
I see, I see. So, oo nga naman, back then, it would have been referred to as a province, no?
Yes.
But now, it's kind of strange almost to refer to Manila or Tondo specifically as a province.
Yes.
But it used to
It
be.
used to be.
Mm.
Mhm.
And I suppose it would start there, no? Kasi nandun yung ports. So I would suppose trading, business,
Yeah.
etc. And of course, our immigrants
Yeah, very
would have
strategic kasi yung location ng Tondo eh. Near the
very,
Manila Bay. Mm-mm.
very, very. So before we continue pala, what inspired you to write Walk Manila?
Okay, so Walk Manila is actually a publication of FEU, Far Eastern University, and it was actually written to coincide and to be aligned with the vision of the Chair Emeritus, Dr. Lourdes Montinola, for people to be more actively engaged in appreciating the history and heritage of Manila, FEU being in the city of Manila. So this Walk Manila book is actually a guidebook for anyone would want to ambulate through the streets of Manila and appreciate the existing architectural legacies still around in the city.
That makes so much sense. So again, obviously for those listening to this podcast, they can't really see what the book looks like, but again, I urge you to actually look it up because it's beautifully illustrated and it's very, very digestible in the sense that each tidbit of information about the buildings are only a page or two long. So, kaya naman pala, habang naglalakad ka around Manila,
Yeah.
you can have it in your bag, whip it
There's a
out,
map. There
read.
are
There
maps.
are maps. Yes, exactly.
Mm.
There are maps, and you can actually see the buildings and where you're going. Sabi nga nung kasama ko kanina, who also looked at the book, pag nawala ka pa, ewan ko na lang. Kasi may mga mapa ng kasama. Okay. So one of the illustrations here that really caught my eye. So syempre I flipped through the books,
Mm-hmm.
saw an illustration and stopped by on that page. And it was about Tutuban. So apparently Tutuban used to be a station.
Yes.
So do you mind telling me more about that? Because I personally feel sad na wala yun. Why is it not working today?
Okay, so Tutuban Station was actually the old Tutuban Cemetery of Tondo. So it was a barrio of Tondo, Tutuban. And later on, because of modernization, because of industrialization, the Spanish authorities thought of bringing in the railroad system here in the Philippines. And they pinpointed that area to be the grand terminus of this Manila to Dagupan railway line.
Ang haba nun. Ang haba ng Manila
Yeah,
to
from Manila
Dagupan.
to yeah. So to San Fernando to Tarlac, there, you know.
Wow.
So the Tutuban station later on became part of the PNR system, Philippine National
Which
Railway
still
System,
exists.
and they thought of adaptively reusing it, repurposing it. So they repurposed the old station into a mall. So it's now the Tutuban Mall.
That's why the mall looks very different because it
Yes.
used to be
Mhm.
something else.
So
I
its
see.
old Victorian architecture is still very apparent in the columns,
Yes, ang
in the
ganda nga eh.
roof.
I see. But they have plans of reviving it, hopefully to
I
still
really
be.
wouldn't know with PNR.
Well, I hope they revive something similar at least. Kasi a line railway that long would be very convenient for us
Mm.
Filipinos, no? Imagine going to
Yeah.
the further provinces. Okay.
So there's one kwento there. You
What?
have before Tutuban Station, there's the monument to Bonifacio, because the house where he lived in was located right there
In
in Barrio Tutuban.
wow.
So he
Okay.
lived there. And before it became a station, it was really a
A
cementerio
cemetery.
with all the settlements there surrounding the cementerio. And it was described during the Spanish period to be very humble. So Bonifacio really was born in very humble
I
surroundings.
see. Okay, that's really nice to know.
Yeah.
But speaking of cemeteries, though, it seems na ang daming cemeteries sa area of Manila alone,
Yeah.
including actually, I'm very curious. Why is there a specific Filipino-Chinese cemetery at meron ding Catholic
Yeah.
cemetery?
Because most of the cemeteries during the Spanish period were under the Catholic Church. Therefore, if you were Chinese and you didn't want to be baptized into the Catholic faith, you wanted to remain to be a Buddhist, you wouldn't be allowed
In the
interment
Catholic
in a Catholic
cemetery.
cemetery. So the Chinese decided to have their own cemetery in La Loma, or
Mm.
literally the hill
Mm.
outside of uh, Santa Cruz, in the
Cemetery.
suburbs of Santa
Yes.
Cruz.
Okay, okay. So that they have their own place of ano pa rin, rest. But apart from those, because we can still see those cemeteries now,
Yeah.
are there other, parang may narinig ako kaninang kinwento nyo eh, other
Actually, there are
cemeteries that,
groups now.
mm,
No, there are groups which are doing dark heritage tours,
mhm,
cemetery tours, and just before Halloween, no, very recently, a group conducted a tour of the Chinese cemetery there in
mm,
La Loma. So they went through the different mausoleums of uh, the Mami King, no Mamon Luke,
mm.
the Wachi
I didn't
Memorial.
know Mama was
Yes,
there.
the founders of China Bank.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Okay. So apart from actually being able to walk around Manila with your book, meron ka ring ibang mga tour options, I suppose, if
Yeah.
you were interested in
Mm-mm,
those. That's
mm-mm.
very Manila is so rich with history, no, na ang dami nating opportunities to actually get to know the city through these tours. Okay. And actually, sorry, speaking of, I don't mean to dwell in the topic, no, but we were talking about the church earlier and how a lot of the Phil Chai, who, or Chinoy, who were baptized in the Catholic faith. So there's Binondo Church, no? And nasunog na po yun, di ba? But they always keep rebuilding it, of course, for syempre church kasi siya.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned earlier na yung mga tombstones doon, people don't realize they're actually,
Yeah.
kumbaga, stepping
On tombstones.
onto the tombstones themselves, which
Mm-hmm.
were there Spanish times pa.
Spanish times pa. Mm-hmm.
Sobrang,
Right
for
there in front of the main portal. So
yeah,
nandun si Juan Junicio Co, his tombstone right there in
right
front of the
there.
portal. Very big lapida.
Mm-mm. Grabe, no? It's just, do you think that maybe then it was considered medyo, syempre tahimik,
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, diba? Usually how the cemeteries we have now are medyo malayo sa city.
Mm-mm.
Would you think or would you say na ganun yung vibe niya before? Kasi ngayon, syempre, it's very busy now because it's the nucleus of our greater Metro
Mm-hmm.
Manila. But,
Actually, the front area of Binondo Church was the atrium. It was a church atrium, and it was also the church cemetery. Kaya lang, when they wanted to make improvements in Binondo to connect Arena Regente with the church, they expropriated the atrium and converted it into a street. So the cemetery is no longer there. Well, it's there
it's
underneath.
there.
No?
Technically, it's still
Underneath the
there.
street. So it changed now. The
Oo,
vibe has
so talagang
changed.
naging
Mm-mm.
busy na rin talaga
Mm-hmm,
siya.
mm-mm.
And now everyone technically can visit freely, but a lot of them may not be aware of it.
Mhm.
That's it's like an open secret almost. Okay. So, Binondo has so much history considering it is one of the smaller areas nga in Manila, no? And in Tondo being one of the bigger ones. I now want to move on to something that I also saw in one of the pages, Escolta. So, my friend loves Philippine architecture. I mean, who doesn't? Ang ganda ng architecture natin, di ba? But I noticed that in Escolta, ang daming magagandang buildings. And ngayon ko lang nalaman from your book that the Sa Manilo building in Escolta Street was awarded in 1928 for the best office
Yes.
design. Office
Yes.
design.
Yeah. It was designed by Andres Luna de San
Mm.
Pedro, the son of the painter Juan Luna, the one who did Spoliarium.
Amazing, yes. Polario. One of the biggest and best paintings I've
Yeah.
ever seen in my life. So, why do you think buildings like that have just stopped existing in our current culture?
In our current culture, maybe because some people would want their buildings to be renovated, modernized. So some of these old styles they just disappear, or there are certain events that happen, like maybe a war would come in, earthquakes would come
Yeah.
in, calamities. So that would be some of the reasons why we don't see these buildings anymore. So Escolta was actually teeming with old buildings, but the war came and many of them were actually destroyed. The Some of the buildings you see there, they were rehabilitated,
Mm.
restructured, retrofitted because of the war. Some were never rebuilt, like the Crystal Arcade. So it's no longer there. What used to stand on the Crystal Arcade area was the old PNB building, which was torn down
Yeah.
recently. So that's
Ang
how
sakit
things
pakinggan when you
go.
say
Yeah.
it that way, no?
And some of the buildings, they are already not structurally
Sound.
fit.
Mm.
So they have to be condemned and have to be torn down.
But do you have faith maybe that maayos pa yung mga remaining nating historically relevant buildings?
Yeah, so there is a concept no in conservation adaptive reuse. So you can reuse the building and then modernize it, no, but maybe adapt it to the demands of the times.
Yes, yes.
Yon, so that's one way. Yung iba naman like for Capitol Theater, no, in Escolta, it became an issue, no? Why do you have to tear down that old building? It's a relic from the
It
past,
is. Ang
no?
ganda-ganda
So
nun.
an experts panel came in, they visited the site, and they said that no, it's already condemnable. And so many interventions came in already.
And speaking of heritage, so for those of you who might not be aware, is it legally bound or ano? Basta, in essence, bawal mag... Correct me if I'm wrong, Professor, pero hindi ho ba bawal magtanggal or mag... Well, you can't destroy a building designed by national artists, right? So that includes, actually, napag-usapan natin kanina, um, Greenbelt, for example.
Yeah.
There are several green belts, if you guys aren't familiar, 1 to 5. The first one being uh, a heritage site, basically because it was designed by a national artist. Is that right to say that it's a heritage site? No, no, no. But
It's
that it was
yeah,
designed by a
no, it's
national
a
artist.
heritage. It's
Yeah.
heritage by Leandro Locsin.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a wonder of the world for it to be a heritage site. So there's that. So hopefully we can maintain that as it should be maintained. And then kung dadami pa yung greenbelt, for example, hayaan na natin dumami in its modernity.
Mhm.
Pero yung mga ganun dapat ma-retain. Okay, so going back to Manila, ito na lang.
Binondo comes from the word binundok. It was really hilly.
So again, I can't believe that Binondo is such a small area in this map that I'm looking at right now. But so many people love going to Binondo for the food, for the culture, for the architecture, the design, right? So, what historical site or museum in Binondo would you recommend for visitors interested in learning about its history? Kasi ang dami dito sa book eh. But
Oh,
what would
okay,
you
okay.
recommend?
Okay, you can actually go to Mega World's Lucky Chinatown Mall. Okay, at the top floor of the Lucky Chinatown Mall and also at the top floor of the Lucky Chinatown Hotel, there is the Chinatown Heritage Museum by Mega World
Oh.
Lifestyle Malls. So it actually encapsulates the history of Binondo.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
So
that
that's a
was
project of
there.
Andrew Tan actually because he would really love no to portray to present to the Filipino people the history, the heritage of the Chinoys here
Mm.
in Binondo.
So that's where...
Mhm.
Is it right? Sorry. So that's where they have rich history. That's essentially where they
Mhm.
started off.
Yes, so you'll find
Fresh
there
off the boat, kumbaga.
the beginnings of Binondo in its many galleries. So the beginning as a Dominican mission settlement, and then the trade between the Chinese and the Filipinos, and then the rise of the Chinoys or the
The mestizos, yes.
no, during the 19th century. So you'll find there in one gallery a botica, then another gallery, the 1930s Escolta. So there, and it also has a special gallery for seasonal exhibits.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay, that's
There's a
definitely...
Tranvia there. You can go there. You can visit it.
There's a...
Tranvia.
Oh, wow.
Mm-mm.
Okay. I did not know this and I live in
You
Manila.
should
I
go.
mean, Metro Manila at least. Okay, that's definitely going to be on my checklist now. And hopefully that's going to be on all of your checklists too, for those of you listening. Okay, so again, because it has such rich history, what do you personally see as the future of Binondo?
So, Binondo will forever be inscribed in the history of Manila as the site where immigrant Chinese really lived and gave birth to the first generation of Chinoys or Mestizos de Sangley or Mestizos Chinos. So, and from the Mestizos Chinos would arise the Principalia or the Ilustrados of the 19th century who became part of the propaganda movement, of the revolutionary movement. So they became part of the nationalist movement also. Uh, for Binondo would be the home of many important people. Roman Ongpin had his arts gallery and studio and art store in Binondo. Jose Rizal's family had houses in Binondo. When Rizal studied in Intramuros, he lived actually in
In
Binondo.
Binondo.
When he was very young, he would walk the bridge, go to Intramuros, report there for school, and go back again. And then
Grabe.
it was the birthplace of General Antonio Luna. So many people lived in Binondo. They grew up there, and many historical ties no can be seen while unraveling no the history of Binondo and architecture, the culture, the food of the Chinoys, the American entrepreneurs, the Japanese no when they figured here during the early 1930s, 1920s, they also had businesses in Binondo. So it was a melting pot, really.
It really
And that will
was.
be forever be inscribed in the history of Manila. But moving forward, we see Binondo now with modern buildings, high rise condominiums. But here and there are relics from the past. And we hope that people, no, the like us, no, your generation, tanda na ako.
Ay, grabe naman.
your your generation will take care no of these buildings and ensure that that this will be preserved for
Generations to
posterity.
come.
Yes, for the generations to come.
I really hope so. I really hope since I'm a millennial, so medyo nagiging heads na nga of different
Mm-mm.
industries yung generation ko, no? So for the millennials out there, please, we have to preserve our history, like at least even in this way. Para din naman ma-experience ng mga younger, younger generations. Okay, so we've talked about Binondo quite extensively. For all of the beautiful architecture here in Manila, not just Binondo, but the whole of Manila, would you want it to remain as is? Or would you like to get it or make it a little bit more modernized as an architect?
Okay. Okay. So I think I mentioned to you before in conservation. No?
Yes.
There is one concept of fossilizing.
Mm.
Fossilizing a building, not doing anything to it, just allow it to be as it is. But there's also another concept which is dynamic restoration or dynamic conservation. You try to continue the life of the building by making it more convenient, more comfortable for people to live
Mm.
in today, and to make it more more in answer. No, it will answer the demands of our current generation. So in conservation, we also need to look into how these old buildings can integrate internet cabling,
Mm,
air
of course.
conditioning, the requirements for fire safety. Kasi noong unang panahon naman, wala
Wala
pang fire
yun.
code.
Oo, wala pang fire code,
Oo,
wala
hindi
pang
naman requirement may
aircon.
fire exit. So how do you integrate these things? So I
Mm.
think these old buildings should also be modernized in that sense, make them safe for public use, uh, safe for the future generations, and be in keeping with the demands of present society. Yon, internet, di ba?
Yes,
Ganon.
all while keeping the
Oo.
legacy, no, of
While
that
keeping the
building.
legacy.
Yeah.
So I think it's also very important that the values of the building, its significance would be retained, and also the authenticity is
Yes.
retained. So that's very important. So we can always modernize an old heritage building. But if you try to make so many interventions, authenticity is gone. So
Yes.
wala, wala na yon. So what
Mm-mm.
is very important, retain the value, retain the significance, and retain the authenticity
Authenticity.
of the building.
That's beautiful. Hi, I'm looking forward to the future of our architecture, actually, because I feel like the more the years join, the more people realize the significance and the value of being able to do that and retaining these legacies. Yeah. Okay, so that was just a few snippets from your book, actually. So, is there anything else that you might want to share off of Walk Manila? Since ito nga naman yung book na nabasa namin of yours, but I'm
Mhm.
sure madami pang iba.
Okay, so I think you should buy Walk Manila. Not
I'm
because
definitely gonna buy a copy of Walk Manila
oh,
because this is
not
the
because I
company.
authored it, but
Ano eh?
because it really contains a lot of historical snippets, vignettes, no, from the past about the many different historical buildings here in the city. So I think it's also about time, no, that we learn about the history of Malate, of
Yes.
Ermita, what are the major
Malacanang.
Malacanang. So actually, if you see, the book is divided into two parts: the northern districts part,
Mhm.
the discussion on the northern districts, and the discussion on the district south of the Pasig River.
Mhm.
So an add-on is actually the development of the south would come in during the American period. The development came in much later, during the early 1900s to
Mm.
onwards. Yon. So that's the. So okay, you should buy the book and read.
Actually, oh,
Yeah.
this podcast did not mean to sound like an advert for Walk Manila, by the way. It's
Mm-mm-mm.
just that it's a really nice book that we have in the office. Now that I've seen it then, I want my own copy kasi ang ganda nga niya talaga. And I am so glad that we have you for today's guest and to talk about these things
Thank you.
and to hopefully inspire others then to
Thank
be
you.
interested in what you've written, which is basically the rich history
Thank you
of
also for
everything in
having this
Manila.
podcast on heritage, on history.
No, we really want people to be aware of it as well because we think it's a beautiful thing to talk about, to be aware of, and to appreciate. So, to have people like you sharing these things means a lot to us as well. So, hopefully, that you guys who are listening also will get inspired by this and share this to those whom you feel like would also appreciate it.
Thank you, Julia.
So, thank you so much, Professor. Actually, ang dami kong pwedeng itawag kay Professor. Pwedeng architect, pwedeng doctor. But I'm gonna choose Professor for this podcast. So, thank you, Professor
Thank you
Diviana,
also. Thank you,
for joining
Presello. Thank you,
us.
Julia. Thank you, Don. Alam mo ba't
Divisoria.
Divisoria ang name?
Ay, bakit? Bakit Divisoria ang tawag sa Divisoria?
Divisoria is a Spanish word for a dividing line.
Dividing line?
So
What was it dividing?
the mercado or the market of Binondo was located right beside the dividing line between Tondo and Binondo.
Oh,
So ito yung line, boundary
okay.
line. Nandun yung
Okay.
palengke, Divisoria.
Sorry, pero nasaan yung Divisoria? Is it in...
Yung,
Dun
yung
mismo sa
Divi Mall.
line? No, I mean, pero saan siya kasama? Sa Binondo?
So, Binondo siya.
Binondo
Oo,
side
kasi dati
siya.
siyang
Okay.
merkado de
Ah,
Binondo or Market
okay.
of Binondo. Ito yung market to. And then, ito yung dividing line talaga.
Mm-mm.
Yun.
Ah, okay,
Kaya
okay.
Divisoria.
Now
Oh,
I know.
wag na.
No, ang ganda nga nun eh. Now we know why it's called Divisoria. Okay, okay. Ang cute ko yun. Okay, so thank you again, Professor, for joining us. And hopefully we can, we're definitely going to talk about more of this outside of the podcast, but you never know. Professor could be back for another podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Presello, for inviting me here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to learn more about Manila and about the Philippines, its culture and its history, I have a blog site. It's hardinsulate.wordpress.com.
So if you guys are looking forward to that, and if you have any suggestions or you want us to have another guest, maybe someone similar, maybe someone different, who knows? Just let us know. And we are definitely looking forward to making more podcasts for you guys and with you guys. So again, I have been Julia, and I was joined by Professor Deviana. And thank you for listening to our first ever Presello podcast for the membership channel. And we will talk to you next time. Thanks for joining us for that episode of the Presello podcast, where we talk about design, culture, and all things related to homes.